Village of Lake Bluff Board of Trustees. It is February 10th, 2020, and this is our regular board meeting evening. And could we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Ankerman. Here. Trustee Charlo. Here. Trustee Dort.
Here.
Trustee Marquis. Here. Trustee Meyer.
Here.
Trustee Toll.
Here.
We all stand for the pledge. I just got caught in something. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all. All right. Tonight, we have a proclamation, and I am particularly pleased. We often do proclamations, but this is kind of a special one, I think, tonight, particularly as I look up here at this table, and I see four of us up here that 100 years ago would not be sitting here. And so I would like to read it, and I'm going to ask, I believe, we'll present you with something, and he'd like to come up. But let me read the proclamation first. We recognizing the 100th anniversary of the League of Women Voters. Whereas on February 14th, 1920, the League of Women Voters League was formed at the Congress Hotel in Chicago. And whereas the League was formed 6 months prior to, but in anticipation of, the ratification of the 19th Amendment giving women the right to vote in the United States. And whereas the League was a political experiment designed to help 20 million women carry out their new responsibilities as voters by educating them about issues. And whereas, from the beginning, the League determined that it would be nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing any political party or individual candidate. And whereas the League continues today as a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. And whereas today, the League is composed of members in over 700 local, county, and state leagues in all 50 states, plus the District of Columbia, the Virgin Islands, and Hong Kong. And whereas among these state leagues is the League of Women Voters of Illinois, which was incorporated on March 22nd, 1920, and in turn is composed of 40 local leagues. And whereas the Lake Bluff League of Women Voters, presently the Lake Forest Lake Bluff Area League of Women Voters, was incorporated in 1930. And whereas the League is a civic organization that has fought since 1920 to improve government and engage everyone in the decisions that impact their lives, and whereas the League will celebrate its 100th anniversary on February 14th, 2020. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Village President and Board of Trustees of the Village of Lake Bluff, County of Lake, and State of Illinois, hereby recognize and congratulate the League of Women Voters on their 100th anniversary, and declares February 14th, 2020 as a date to celebrate the League of Women Voters and its vision of a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. That such recognition and gratitude of the Village of Lake Bluff be publicly expressed to the League of Women Voters, and that this proclamation be incorporated in the minutes of the Village Board meeting, and an executed copy be presented to the Lake Forest, Lake Bluff Area League of Women Voters. Oops. Would like to officially present this to the League. Do we have some, I believe we have some representatives.
We have some representatives. I'm going to have you present to Ann so I can have a nice picture for our newsletter.
All right.
And then I will say a few words on behalf of the League.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Grant, thank you.
That's beautiful. One more time. Thank you.
Get all the chins. Okay.
And she's going to reply.
Okay, and thank you all.
Thank you, Lake Bluff Village Board, for recognizing the League of Women Voters. My name is Lynette Foss, and I'm here to represent the League of Women Voters for the Lake Forest and Lake Bluff area. President Lori could not be here tonight, Lori Rose, so she asked me to step in her stead. This year marks the centennial of both the 19th Amendment, and that gave women the right to vote, of course, and the League of Women Voters. Like other women throughout the nation, the women of Lake Forest and Lake Bluff did not take their new voting responsibilities lightly. Desiring the information to vote more intelligently, they formed the League of Women Voters of Lake Forest in 1926 and the League of Women Voters of Lake Bluff in 1930. In the early years, the League joined other leagues throughout the country and state in supporting measures to get out the vote, to improve the legal status of women, and to reform selected government practices. Locally, the League helped establish the Lake County Public Health Department and supported the movement for a Lake County Forest Preserve with emphasis on acquiring land along the floodplain of the Des Plaines River. So this is all thanks to your local League of Women Voters. In 1960, the League received the World Understanding Award from the Chicago Council on Foreign Relations for its work on foreign policy within its membership and the community. The League studied the local caucus in Lake Forest in the late 80s, which led to many League-recommended changes, and in the early 90s, the League spearheaded a successful drive for an elected school board. That's very important. Today, the League is active on a wide range of issues and is well known for registering voters and hosting debates and forums. The League provides leadership and training opportunities outside of the workforce to build marketable talents and to prepare members to lead issues-based coalitions. On April 2nd of this year, we will commemorate our centennial and celebrate women who have served in local government, past and present, at a special reception at the Ferrari dealership, and you are all welcome to attend. We will be sending invitations. Women such as Phyllis Albrecht, who served as the first woman president of the village board and who was also president of the League of Women Voters of Lake Bluff and the League of Women Voters of Lake Forest, Lake Bluff area, will be honored among many others. We hope you will join us for this very special event. We thank you for your acknowledgement and hope to see you on April 2nd.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. We now, I would like to have a motion, please, to be able to accept this proclamation.
So moved.
So moved. Thank you very much by Ms. Marquis. And a second.
Second.
Ms. Markey, that was Ms.
Ms.
Ankerman.
Oh, Ms. Ankerman, you didn't hear me hearing in, sorry. Okay. First and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. We have consideration of the minutes of the January 27, 2020 Village Board meeting. Do I have a motion to consider?
So moved.
So moved by Ms. Ankerman. Do I have a
Second.
second?
Mr.
Second by Mr. Charlo. Thank you. Any additions, amendments? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. At this point in time, the village board allows 15 minutes for any members of the audience who would like to speak on something that is not on this evening's agenda. I believe we have someone that would like to talk.
Good evening, Mayor, trustees. I bring greetings from the commanding officer, Captain Leong from Naval Station Great Lakes, and wish you a good 2020 year for your community. I just wanted to point out a couple things, and I'm going to be leaving. I've provided a copy of this before to you. I have more copies, so you can leave it to your citizens. Many of you probably have seen the Great Lakes Bulletin over the years, and last April it's changed its mode and it's gone electronic. And what I will do is pass on to the city administrator the link that can be easily downloaded. This past Friday's issue was very interesting, talking about a couple that had recently got married, and they decided to recognize their service and their gratitude to the United States. They had immigrated from Brazil. Their first language is Portuguese. But what was interesting was that they initially came to better themselves, but they wanted to be better performers as athletes. And they were in their individual sports, but they became triathlons. And they actually got married at the end of the Hawaiian Ironman race along the trail. people were dressed in their biking gear, their swimming gear, or whatever. But just last week, in January, the last Friday of January, they graduated from boot camp. And it's an interesting article in it. Would encourage you to take the pride of what our immigrants are doing and wanting to serve us. Also, I would have pointed out, we also continue our First Fridays at Great Lakes. And if there is anyone in the group that may not have gotten their invitation for this coming Friday that would like to have that possibility to attend, I'll stay after the meeting and talk with you and see if we can get you on the list. And that's this Friday, the 14th. For the month of March, right now, the first Friday is scheduled for the 6th of March, which is the first Friday. One of the things that do come up periodically, and you have it in your community too, Great Lakes is going through these last 2 weeks security training exercises, and that's the main reason for the postponement this week. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. And we are very happy to have the base, as it's been there since 1911. We appreciate it very much. Okay, Village Board sets the order of the meeting. I'm going to suggest that we take number 14 and then number 15. Do I have a motion to do so?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Meyer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Toll. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we can take number 14, which is a resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement by and between the Village of Lake Bluff and the Public Procurement Authority of Wilsonville, Oregon, which is a national joint procurement cooperative. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Dewar. Do I have a second?
Second.
And second by Ms. Ankerman.
Markey.
The FY 20, was that correct?
Markey.
Oh, Ms. Markey, I'm sorry.
Um,
The FY 2020 village budget includes $45,000 for new fire equipment turnout gear. This equipment would replace worn and damaged equipment in service beyond its useful life, and supply new equipment for new volunteer firefighters who have joined since the dissolution of the Knollwood Fire Department. The fire department has recommended the purchase of $77,451.60 of turnout gear, which is 34 sets, from Lion Group Incorporated under a joint purchasing agreement held by NPP Gov, which is an intergovernmental purchasing cooperative. Of this sum, $41,173.20 would be FEMA assistance to firefighter grant funds, and $38,337.06 would be village funds. There would be two separate purchases, as FEMA requires that their funds are used in a separate transaction. Section 7.2 and 8.2 of the village's purchasing policy and procedural manual exempt purchases such as this from competitive bidding. Procedurally, this purchase requires two separate actions. One would authorize an intergovernmental agreement with the Cooperative Purchasing Association, and the second would authorize the purchases. This item would approve the intergovernmental agreement with NN.gov. Does anyone on the board have a question regarding this agreement? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the second part of this, which is a resolution authorizing the purchase of fire department turnout gear. I think we've just done that. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Meyer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Charlo. Are any questions or comments regarding this part of the agreement? Hearing none, this is a roll call.
Trustee Ankerman.
Aye.
Trustee Charlo.
Aye.
Trustee Dewar.
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Trustee Meyer.
Aye.
Trustee Toll.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And we can't wait to see you all in your new gear.
Once again, thank you for your support.
Thank you. All right, we'll go back to the regular order of the meeting. which is the Village Finance Report, which is a warrant report for February 1 through 15, and the January 2020 payroll. We have expenditures of village funds for payment of invoices in the amount of $198,055.51 for February 1 through 15, and expenditures of village funds for payment of payroll in the amount of $456,134.59 for January 2020. Total expenditures, $654,190.10. Do I have a motion for the warrant report?
So moved.
And so moved by Ms. Marquis. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Meyer. Any questions or comments to the Finance Director for this? All right, hearing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Charlo.
Yes.
Trustee Dort.
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Trustee Meyer.
Aye.
Trustee Toll.
Aye.
Trustee Enkelman.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Village Administrators Report.
I have no report this evening.
Village Attorney's Report.
I have no report tonight.
I will chime in also. I do not have a report tonight. We have the consent agenda, acceptance of the correspondence delivered to the Village Board of Trustees and the informational reports on January 24th and 31st, okay? And then also a resolution reallocating the 2020 Village of Lake Bluff volume cap to the Village of Buffalo Grove. All right, do we have, and I'll just read how that goes, that's part of it. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Mr. Dewar, do I have a second?
Second.
A second by Mr. Toll for clarification on what the reallocation of the volume cap means. Industrial revenue bonds or private activity bonds are tax-exempt bonds issued on behalf of businesses engaged in the manufacture or production of tangible personal property. The state's overall authority under federal law to issue this form of debt is rationed among the state of Illinois and the state's local governments. This annual allocation is referred to as the volume cap. Due to significant upfront insurance costs, industrial revenue bonds less than $2 million generally are not cost-effective. As a result, municipalities rarely use their own volume cap and instead pool it with other municipalities or cede it to the state. In the past, the village has transferred its volume cap authority to the private activity bond clearinghouse pool, which is hosted by the Village of Buffalo Grove. Buffalo Grove receives the combined volume caps allocated to each participating agency and then may issue private activity bonds on behalf of the pool to finance eligible projects throughout Lake County. Each participating entity receives a 0.5% fee should their volume cap be used for a project. January 20th, 2020, Lake County Partners wrote to solicit the village's participation in the pool via transfer of the village's 2020 volume cap, which is $589,785, to the Village of Buffalo Grove. In the absence of any local business requests for use of Lake Bluff's volume cap, staff is providing this request to the village board for consideration. Village staff will be in attendance, obviously. So did we have any questions from the trustees? All right, hearing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Dort.
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Trustee Meyer.
Aye.
Trustee Toll.
Aye.
Trustee Enkelman.
Aye.
Trustee Charlo.
Aye.
Okay. Item number 13, which is a resolution extending advisory review for the demolition of the landmarks located at 0 to 220 Jensen Lane, AKA 136 Green Bay Road, which is the Stonebridge subdivision. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Okay, and do I have a second? Was that Mr. Toll? Mr. Toll. Okay, thank you. On December 6, 2019, the Village of Lake Bluff received a permit application for the complete demolition of the landmark designated manor house, carriage house, and certain landscape features located within the Stonebridge subdivision at 0-230 Jensen Lane, allocate 136 Green Bay Road. Prior to issuance of a permit, the municipal code requires the Historic Preservation Commission review such a request regarding landmarks. The commission found that the permit application was inconsistent with the purpose and goals of the Historic Preservation Code at their December 11th, 2019 meeting, and opened an advisory review conference on January 30th. The advisory review process delays the issuance of a demolition permit for up to 120 days to allow the applicant and the commission to attempt to reach a mutually satisfactory resolution of the commission's concerns. As of April 9th, which is 120 days after the application, the applicant may notify the village in writing that it no longer intends to participate, and the village would ordinarily be required to allow demolition to proceed, subject to the village's ordinary building code requirements. In this specific instance, changes to the Stonebridge planned residential development would also be required for a demolition permit to be issued. The Board of Trustees may extend the review period for an additional 30 days if the board determines that the commission's effort to preserve a landmark will promote the public welfare without causing undue hardship on the permit applicant. At its January 30th, 2020 meeting, the Historic Preservation Commission voted to request that the board extend the review period for up to additional 30 days. Does the board have, anyone have any questions, concerns? I will just make a few comments here regarding this. There seems to be obviously lots of information regarding, interest regarding this. Right now, the developers of Stonebridge, or Roanoke Group, has put in no additional plan for an application for any kind of revised PRD. When the revisory review for the demo permit comes up again, it will come to the village to determine, do we grant the request for a demolition permit? If we do so, that would negate the existing PRD agreement, and it would revert back to the original zoning, which is approximately 30 homes on an acre and a half each lot. Or the village could determine that the PRD should still be in effect and that the developer is bound to honor that PRD agreement. An additional thing is, if we do grant the demolition permit, you have to understand that it goes back to the existing zoning. There is no guarantee of the 10 acres being reserved for village use, and then you have also lost any leverage with any preservation for the manor house. So there are lots of things to consider as this goes through, but we do have some time. Any questions for my comments? Just as one more thing is, as I understand it, the village is pursuing with prosecutors to attempt to collect on the fines levied
That's correct.
against the
Yep.
developer. Okay, that's good.
Related to the fence construction, the illegal
Right.
fence construction, yep.
Okay. All right, we have that. This is a voice vote. I believe I've gotten the, I've already got,
I don't know if there's somebody here.
I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses on. I apologize. Somebody have a question?
Was it open to any kind of comment? I understand that there's been zero taxes for the last
Would you mind come on up, Mrs. Brebner, would you want to come up and just identify yourself if you have a statement to make?
Well, when this was first undertaken as far as the Harrison Conference Center, obviously it's a historic site, and I know there was permits to remove the tent and remove the addition, and then I remember we had signatures through all the areas. Our home is on West Witchwood, on Green Bay Road, and Mr. Litzinger had brought all these signed petitions and documents from the neighboring community to keep it E1 zoning, which is estate zoning, which is one of the reasons we bought the property there versus over on 43 near Abbott. And I remember the current mayor at the time basically told Mr. Litzinger at the time that he said if it stays E1 zoning, he would donate his home to basically as a hospice center. And she said, Mr. Litzinger, I consider that a bribe. You know, and after all the years that he has paid taxes, his son moved out of Lake Bluff and moved into Lake Forest. So not only is that fence constantly falling down, but if I'm not mistaken, there are certain things that you give for a historic preservation, that you give them an easement on the taxes and everything else to do this. This person, that Roanoke Group, bought that property at a steal. And at the time, they wanted to do the duplexes and over 55, and then they changed it to over 55, but you could have children there. And I think the condominium fees or the assessment fees were like $600 a month, and obviously they could get more houses there because of the divided wall. At the same time that people said they can park on Witchwood and go to the open lands area. And I remember my husband was called by Circumar, he went to school with him, and he said, you can't even get two cars to pass each other on that street because it's so narrow. And they were going to tear down the fence, all these things. And Mr. Circumar said, Dennis, you're out of line, you're out of line. And the whole thing was to keep that conference center, which used to be a monastery, and preserve it. And nothing has been done on that for years now. And I understand from Rick Lesser that there's been no taxes paid on that. Well, I would love to pay no taxes on our house. You know, it certainly hasn't gone up in value because with the ethylene oxide that's being spewed and a known carcinogen from Medline into this area. So it's unbelievable to me that they can't be held responsible for their contract and their due diligence on that property and do nothing of it. Years ago, Westlake Forest campus, high school campus, was the same thing. Took too much money to maintain it. They were going to tear that down. And my father-in-law, who was chief of police at the time, said that was ridiculous to build that campus. Well, they took care of it, and they maintained it, and they did not tear it down. Why would we have a historic preservation like this when you have people on Center Avenue that are doing historic preservations and doing it, you know, and basically the historic walk in Lake Bluff? Why are those people going ahead and abiding by the conventions of the board to go ahead and do things appropriately and historically to keep these homes intact? If you're going to allow this developer that bought the property as a steal to go ahead and not preserve the conference center. To me, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And even when he was doing it, he said, oh, we've got all these acres, we're going to go ahead, but we're not going to build in the front, we're going to build in the back, and so that makes it perfectly fine. Well, it was more dense than the sanctuary because of the acreage that they were building on. The other thing is the transportation effect on Green Bay Road. You can't get out. If we have a flood, well, we've had many of them, that if you go ahead and you try to exit, go around Green Bay Road, going into Witchwood, and think you can go south or north, you can't. You can't. You're stuck there, okay? But at the same time, that if you had, when you did a traffic study, they said, oh, there was no problem if there was a national, you know, if there's an emergency. either physical with the environment, or if there was a terrorist attack. Well, you know, the Green Bay Road gets backed up repeatedly. You know, it's much more traffic used than another road, and there's not too many, with the train tracks and the fire department in Norwood shutting down, and having the police force and the fire department being dispatched out of Glenview, it's not the same town that we moved into 23 years ago, or that my husband, who's been here for 4 generations, on both sides of his family. So I don't know where the conscience is of the past board of the trustees and what the conscience is now. You know, I don't know if my husband wants to say anything more. He knows more about it than I do. But it's just crazy to me that you wouldn't keep it the estate zoning and to tear it down and then make it estate zoning. I don't think there's a market here, and we didn't think there was 10 years ago, for houses that didn't, in this kind of climate, that didn't have an in-ground indoor pool or a golf course or something else. You know, I don't know what's happening. They're trying to shut down the golf course too. Where's Lake Forest High School going to practice? You know, what do you want in this community if you don't want these to keep it the same that people move in here for? I mean, I know people that moved out of Lake Forest into Lake Bluff because of the familiarity and the way the community is here. You know, it's so, I don't know. I didn't prepare for this, as you can tell. You know?
Thank you very much. Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this particular issue? Yes. Sir, you want to come?
Dennis Bretner. That's my wife, of course, but yeah, I agree with some of what she says, but what is happening? I mean, what is occurring with this? Because we didn't understand that there was it was set up as a separate corporation. My understanding was, and they were supposed to preserve it. Isn't that the case? Wasn't there a separate entity that was basically preserving that building? And it was a not-for-profit for them to, isn't that correct? That's my recollection back when that came up. So I thought that was the case.
You're really close. You're referring to the front 10 acres, the conservation area.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. So my understanding was that it was going to be a separate corporation, a not-for-profit.
Ultimately, that's what the development agreement calls for.
Okay.
But it's in transition still because it's a stalled development, right? So they've never completed the transaction and completed all the work. And after all the improvements were done and all the forestry improvements, there was to be a playground in that forested area, the front 10 acres as well. Once all that work was done, the ownership would be transferred over to the village, and there would be a caretaker, if you will, that would take care of the conservation area. And that person or party was yet to be identified in the long term, but that was the original plan.
Because again, my recollection was too that it was a contract that they made with the village, and to set up that corporation basically and I know we tried to give money to them and everything else. We never get a hold of them. I mean, it was supposed to be a trust, but what happened with that? I mean, it seemed like nothing's been going on for 5 years. We always wondered, well, what's happening with this? So why did the village let that go? Nothing going on? They didn't put any heat or apparently, or...
They have been heating. Yeah, I can give you a quick overview if that's all right.
Yeah, if you could, thanks. So we can see it, but I don't know what's inside it anymore.
Yeah, there was actually, you can go on the village's website and take a virtual tour through the village's Historic Preservation Commission's most recent meeting. They have a video link you can click on and actually tour the inside of the building. So that's, I think, useful for persons who haven't been there in a very long time, and I know people have checked in and want to do that. But generally speaking, so the village back in 15 years ago passed took two actions. One was a planned residential development special use permit and granted certain variations, and they also approved a development agreement. Those two legal instruments have guided the development, what's actually out there and what's allowed as them as property owners to do in terms of develop the property in a very specific way. The original developer back then started the project. There was the economic downturn. Everything got turned upside down and incomplete and stalled for a number of years. The property was sold to a new developer, which is Roanoke Group. They came in, and asked for the village to release them from the obligation that the planned residential development agreement and the development agreement required them to have that subdivision to be age-restricted, 55 and older only. That was one element of the approvals, a condition of approval that they had to meet. They asked, the board said, okay, we'll relinquish that obligation from you. You don't have to do that anymore. But all the other obligations or conditions of approval still were, they had to meet, included the preservation and restoration of the manor and gatehouse. The other element that they were required to do was to complete a forestry management plan and redo the front 10 acres and required that to be deeded over to the village. And so over the years, the developer, Roanoke Group, and Peter Kite, his team, has been working towards that, although glacially. But they came back to the village board probably 6 years ago and sought a new development plan that was different. They only went through preliminary plan. They never completed that process. So right now, the only thing they can do is that original plan going back to 2006 that was approved. That's the only thing they're allowed to do today. And that's what is they're rubbing up against you today, because they have, back in the end of last year, they submitted the demolition permit application to tear down the manor and gatehouse. As I talked about before, the development agreement and the PRD agreement requires them to restore that still. So the village board will have to take some sort of action or no action at the conclusion of this advisory review process that's ongoing at the Historic Preservation Commission, which is the body that will consider a number of issues as they look at this demolition request. But at the end of the day, this group will have to decide whether or not they're going to direct staff to issue a building permit or not. But right now, the Roanoke Group and Peter Kite do not have the right to get a demolition permit at the conclusion of this advisory review process. And so tonight's question in front of the village board is the mandatory time period that they have to wait to get some sort of conclusion on the advisory review conference is usually 120 days. There's a part of our code that says that Historic Preservation Commission can ask the board to extend that for an additional 30 days. That's what the request in front of the village board is tonight, whether or not to extend that to have a total of 150 days for the demo review period to take place. Again, at the conclusion of it, there's no guarantee that they're going to get a demolition permit. This group will have to make a decision, but until then, that's the only question that's in front of them.
So the concept that we understood back when it was put up, when the property was basically required, was that they had a contract to do that. That it wasn't just simply, you can go ahead and do this, but you have a contract to make sure and preserve that. That was part of the deal, and why they got a substantial reduction in the bill, basically in the property. And how much, wasn't that true? There certainly was a contract.
Yeah. So that's what the development agreement I'm talking about. So they had to assume all the responsibilities associated with that. So when they took over the project, there was actually an action by this board. I skipped over that part, but it is, there was a transferee assumption agreement. They assumed all the responsibilities and obligations under that. So that's the contract by which they're held to, unless this group decides to change that.
And haven't they breached that?
The original plan, that again, that's the only thing that has gone through final entitlement process, is 85 total units, that I think it's 43 detached single-family homes, and there were a number of attached duplex units, and then there was also up to 9 condominiums in the manor home, and I think up to 5 in the gatehouse.
So the contract, has it been breached? So isn't there a breach of the contract, the agreement they had with the village? I mean, isn't that true? I mean, what are we, I have a contract and I breach it, it causes me problems. I mean, not for them? I don't get this. I mean, they're not, they got they paid a pretty good price for it. I mean, they didn't pay a lot, they paid
I think they said they paid $8 million for the project.
$8 million.
Yeah.
And that house obviously was supposedly worth quite a bit of money. Obviously, they were supposed to preserve it. They didn't do that. They let it sit out there for this period of time, and there's nothing happening with that. The village is not going to take a stance on that and saying, well, look, if you signed this agreement, you're supposed to come in and you're supposed to preserve it. Instead, they've done nothing. In fact, they've probably destroyed it at this point after it's been sitting there with no heat and water and everything else for a long period of time. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't understand that. If we did this, I think if any of us done that, there would probably be some legal action taken against them. Why isn't that the case here? Why
So-
isn't there some responsibility for this?
Great question. And so the development agreement has in there certain, I'll say, specific activities or obligations that the developer was to undertake, that the village actually holds a letter of credit or a guarantee, cash guarantee, that they will complete certain items.
How much is that?
It's in excess of $2 million.
That's it?
Because when a development of this nature or other subdivisions like this get built, the things or requirements that are usually capitalized like this are public improvements, so sidewalks, roads, water mains, storm sewers, those types of public improvements that will ultimately be the villages, that would be deeded over to the village at the conclusion of the development improvements. So typically our security is only for those types of activities, not the private or other developers' risk, like to build new homes. Like, there's no guarantee that he's going to construct homes, that he gets a subdivision approval, and how that work happens and those other activities are not secured. So that is the developer's risk associated with that project in particular. But the village's security is only for the public improvements, ultimately. And there are certain smaller private improvements that the village was able to negotiate as part of that development agreement in the PRD, some of the fencing and some other things, but the restoration of the historic structures or the actual individual house units was not required. There was a specific schedule of improvements to be followed, so technically the developer has been in breach of that and other items over time, but the village has been trying to work with a developer, any developer who's owned the property, given the downturn and really due to the lack of velocity in the marketplace in terms of for any other residential development in the area. So the village has been working with them as they've done other improvements in the front 10 acres. They've done a number of forestry improvements that have been consistent with the village's tree preservation ordinance, with the approved forestry management plan and good general practices of any forestry program. So they've been removing trees out there, dead or diseased trees. They've been planting new trees. So all that's been ongoing over the last several years.
Well, obviously, from our perspective, obviously as a property owner right there, it's like they've failed in their process. I mean, they've failed this repeatedly. I mean, this has been a disaster. Why would you keep working with them? I mean, they obviously breached their contract and their obligations, what they promised the village to do, and this has been going on for a long time. Why you continue to work with them, I have no idea. I did come up and watch a portion of his presentation. It was pathetic. I mean, it was like a small child sitting there, you know, I didn't do this. I mean, I'm sorry, this is all the cost. I mean, it was a joke. This guy
They're the owner, though.
They're
the owner.
Well, they're the owner, but again, you have an agreement with them. They have an obligation. There's a separate entity that's supposed to preserve that. My understanding, I think you're saying that's correct, preserve that building. That building's fallen apart.
Well, actually, the village has been we've been hiring a structural engineering and architectural firm that have gone in there periodically to examine the structural integrity of the structures. And the times that they've been in there, they've given it a good or great rating in terms of structural integrity. I mean, the good news, and this is part of the bad news for the developer, is that thing is built like a castle, right? So the idea of punching in new electrical conduit, plumbing, HVAC equipment, all that is cutting through, 1.5-inch concrete floors.
It's been sitting there with no heat.
No, it has been heated. They've been having heat brought in during the winter time to keep it at a minimum level, but it has been heated. There hasn't been air conditioning for sure, but there has been heat in there.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the original owners paid $30 million for that. They wanted to have high density at the opposition of the neighboring residents in that area. And even at $8 million and not paying any taxes on vacant land or the housing basically that's there, I think it's a steal.
Well, they've been paying taxes. I think what there may be some wires crossed on over is that they went to the township assessor's office to try to appeal their assessments and get their tax burdens reduced, and they put forth some materials that said their property had zero value, and so, but they are still paying taxes, and I think ultimately the assessor's office, what they did do was take their assessment levels back down as part of an arrangement with them to the 2018 levels, and as opposed to where they had brought them up to the 2019 levels. That was the result of that. So they're certainly paying taxes, and they have been continuously.
Yeah, one of the neighbors looked into it and said that there was lesser, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
That they were paying zero taxes on that property.
Again, I don't know why you'd go down and deal with these people after there's been a failure of this magnitude for this period of time. It seems to me that, how are they going to be Are they going to now do it something different? I don't, I know there's a new plan on it, but this has been going on for a long time.
That's right, it has been. And there is a new plan in the works. They haven't completed that or perfected their application. They're still working towards that, but they have not submitted the complete plan requirements as they are required by code. But I think the plan that they're trying to submit is 98 units is what they've been talking about, which is higher than the originally 85 units, but no multifamily or attached units, all detached single-family, and that there would be no historic preservation elements to it other than landscaping. So some of the original landscaping elements would be repurposed.
What are they doing to the bridges, the buildings that are being built now?
I think their idea would be to demolish even the other structure, the new structures that were built, the model homes and so forth. They had originally tried to move them, relocate them to other lots, but I think they got handcuffed by the bridge at Green Bay Road, trying to move them across that.
Well, that was the other concern that, 15 years ago, or whatever it was are they going to be taking construction trucks through that little bridge, or are they going to be coming off Sunset and bringing all that stuff where their little kids around the neighborhood, again? And because the bridge can't support major construction with trucks, it can't.
I don't know if our village engineer knows the exact weight capacity, but I think it's highly rated to handle traditional trucking and type of fleet you would see with neighborhood construction.
From our standpoint, it's been sitting there for a long period of time, the fence falling down constantly, the buildings, nothing's going on over there, there's been no construction. It's been going on for a long time. This isn't like a...
Absolutely.
And now you're working with them again. Why? They failed repeatedly on this, and this has been a couple of times failed. I mean, this process or this attempt, I don't see it's going to work.
Yeah, and the village doesn't control who owns the property, right? We can't control that.
Well, but you had this agreement, you had this understanding from them, they promised to do this, they haven't.
Then they would lose the PRD. That's what the village can do. They'd lose the PRD. Then it would go back to the original zoning,
Estate.
state zoning. Now, you realize when that was state zoning is done, that would probably mean originally there was no plan to keep the manor house or the 10 acres or anything else. But that's what it will go back to.
And what President O'Hare is referring to, the trade-off, right? If the village revokes the PRD and the development agreement goes away, then there'll be no more obligation for them to restore the historic structures. So that requirement, so they could be issued a demolition permit for that. Likewise, the front 10 acres would no longer be placed in a conservation area.
That land was state one zoning when the conference center was there.
Right. And there was a special use permit to grant the ability for that conference center to operate.
Like before anybody purchased it and took the...
That's what he's saying.
Yeah, we're saying the same thing.
Saying the same thing, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess,
The manor house be used for like tourism and things like that, and keep maybe a state one zoning, but keep the manor house. I mean, that's a treasure in Lake Bluff.
well, I'm just understanding, is there no, in terms of the agreement itself, and I haven't looked at it, I probably should have, but I haven't looked at the actual agreement yet. There was no real teeth in it whatsoever, if they could just sign a contract and there's nothing, that they don't do what they're saying they're going to do? Again, why? I mean, what's the...
Yeah, I don't know if the village attorney has anything to add to that in terms of,
The village is a party to the agreement. The village board has, right, but as the village president said, getting rid of that agreement eliminates the protections to the 10 acres, eliminates the $2 million of letter of credit, removes, that agreement has a lot of protections for the village. So I think there is a balance. You're absolutely right. The village, we may very well have a right to terminate the agreement with notice, et cetera, but there are protections built into that agreement that have been advantageous to the village. So ultimately, when the demolition permit comes up to the village after the advisory review, that will be the question for the village board to decide.
And these board members will have to balance those trade-offs and determine what's in the best interest of the village and then take action or not, depending on that.
No, and I'm sympathetic to the village and its attempt to do this and all the rest of it. I think we're certainly in good faith, but I don't think the contractor's been acting in good faith by any standard, quite frankly. I think he's breached what he's supposed to do. To continue to work with him, maybe you're looking for what's going to be the worst outcome or the least worst outcome, but it seems to me that he's getting away with, doing this, and I know he was crying before seeing this thing, but I don't think there's any obligation to make sure he makes money or gets a good deal on it. He did make an agreement. He said he was going to do that. He didn't do it for a long period of time. And I don't know, that certainly has a bad precedent in terms of any other buildings that might be affected by a similar situation here in the community. I think it's a bad thing to have that out there with this kind of treatment. I mean, this has been a long time this has been going on. So I'm sorry, thanks for your time.
Thank you. And I'm happy to speak with you after the meeting, and we can set up a conversation, talk about it more. Happy to do it.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Okay, I am,
You have a motion and second on the question.
I do. I have a motion and second. Okay, is that a voice vote? Where am I on this? It is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have a trustees report?
I have a little something.
Sure.
I just wanted to share on behalf of the Lake Bluff, the Quasqui Centennial Celebration. Thanks, Drew. One of the things that we're doing is a commemorative brick walkway. It's going to be right outside of Village Hall, right near the fountain. And for those of you that are familiar with commemorative brick walkways, you can buy an engraved brick. So the bricks are being sold for $125. You can pick up a form in the Village Hall. We just put some in Village Hall. You can go online to www.lakebluff125.org, and you can get a form from there. But the more participation we have, the greater, the better the walkway will look in general, because it'll really reflect our community. And all the proceeds go to help the 125 organization, which is, we are doing all the events to celebrate 125 throughout this year, so from January through September of 2020. And then it also goes to help the Lake Bluff History Museum. So, get your brick.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to have a motion to go into executive session.
So moved. Hold on.
For minutes, and also for legal counsel for the village. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
No, I'm sorry, that's a
Roll call.
Roll call, I'm sorry, roll call.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Trustee Meyer.
Aye.
Trustee Toll.
Aye.
Trustee Ankerman.
Aye.
Trustee Charlo.
Aye.
Trustee Dewar.
Aye.
Ba, 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 boo.